so she can catch up if she comes a little late. Okay. Quick question. Can you all wait, can you all hear this from your computers or no? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right, great. Then did Emma trickle in? If you all see Emma come in, just let me know and then I can stop. Otherwise I'll have to mark her tardy. Okay, I'm just gonna mark her and then we'll see where she's at. Okay, so this week we are talking about rhythm and balance. And I'm gonna start, let me first present this, with a musician. So I'm gonna share this, it's a music video, it's not an original music video, but the musician's name is Mort Garson. I'm gonna play this for y'all. It's a 3-minute, it's like the first song in this album. And someone has done the saintly job of animating to this music. If you can't hear it, let me know, and then I'll bump it up. Oh, sorry. Try that again. All right. So that was the song called The Story of Flowers. It's the first track off of this album from the 1970s called Mother Earth's Plantasia. The subtitle is Warm Earth Music for Plants and the People Who Love Them. Mort Garson is an experimental electronic musician, and one of the albums that he's most famous for is this Plantasia, where he's created a set of 10 songs that are meant to be played in the home for your plants. And they're all named after different plants that you would have around the house, your spider plants, your baby blues, your African violets. The science behind whether or not plants enjoy being listened to is murky. Some say it makes a really big difference. Some say that plants love to hear jazz in the sunlight, and others say it's coincidence or other things. But I like this dichotomy of him, this electronic artist, using these very artificial sounds that he creates from keyboards and MIDI pads to sing songs to the earth and sing songs to plant life. So that's a picture of him. And yeah, this is Plantasia. You can listen to it on Spotify. It is goofy, very cheery, and it's just nice. All right, so today in our seminar on rhythm and balance, I'm going to be talking a lot about nature, order, rules, how to break them, and we'll also be getting into other life forms and music. So this first artist, I guess first visual artist to be more specific, is the architect and landscape artist, Roberto Burle Marx. He's a Brazilian modernist, and so he came about in the 1960s after the initial wave of modernism in Europe had made its way to Brazil. And if you know much about modernism, they're focused on form and function and creating objects that are meant to be utilitarian. They're meant to be used by humans, and they all kind of serve a purpose. Roberto Marx had the task of translating these ideas of modernism and form to the country of Brazil, one of the most jungled and forested countries in the world, where nature is at its most untamed. And he was also a botanist. He discovered several types, I think over 40 types of plants in his native country of Brazil. A lot of them are named after him. And so this is some of his landscape work, his playing with the different types of plants in Brazil, as well as the shapes that he creates out of pathways that are meant to lead people through these beautiful landscape gardens. I'm gonna play this. I'm not gonna put audio on, but we can kind of just like see his progression as a visual artist over time. So we can see some of his earlier paintings and line drawings, and then he takes his turn towards abstraction and color. It's always interesting to see artists working in the abstract and their earlier paintings, you know, being possibly assignments about like photorealism and how to render the world. And then they kind of throw that all away and do this other fun stuff. He works in the public. He creates gardens. He creates spaces for government buildings. And I love his architectural drawings. They just have so much fun, a lot of rhythm in the way he's drawing these things that are meant to serve a purpose. And these are some other artists that have been inspired by his work. Here again were some of these architectural renderings. They look quite different from typical blueprints that you would see. To me, they have a lot of life, and that links to this idea that he is thinking about nature and thinking of ways that architecture can work seamlessly within nature. He also creates tapestries. So these were some of his textile works that he's creating. also referencing a lot of the lines that he creates in his landscapes. Okay, so this next artist I want to bring up is someone that we might have studied before in class. This is Alexander Calder. He's famous for these works where he's creating mobiles. Think of a mobile that you would put above a baby's crib to put them to sleep. And in his case, he's very attuned to this idea of balance, specifically from things hanging from the ceiling. And so these are all meant to be hung, and these shapes sway in the wind. And another thing that Calder's interested, he's interested in biology and different animals. So a lot of these, mobiles that he's creating are inspired by nature. This one here is a spider. And it's actually, I think it's called the Itsy Bitsy Spider. I might be making that up, but I've definitely showed this to kids in New York, and they love seeing this. And if you know that like finger path that you're supposed to do with that nursery rhyme, it feels like this spider is doing those same lines with its fingers, crawling up spouts, yada, 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 all that. I like showing Calder's early work as well. One of the pieces, or performances, I should say, that he became most famous for was his circus. So he created all of these little structures and figurines out of household materials like wire and cloth and sacks. And he would perform this circus to people. He spent several years in France and met a lot of artists along the way. And this was kind of his big break, was him making these dioramas and figures and performing them for people. And he would pretend to be the circus, the ringleader of this show. And again, some of his other works, he's not always working from mobiles hanging, but he also does some standing structures. And I feel like this collection of works in particular really shows like his progression from these objects that you can play and perform to these. All right. I'm going to now show two artists, two Japanese American artists that were also working around the same time as Calder. And they're working in the field of sculpture and also interested in form, rhythm, balance. Here we have Noguchi, Isamu Noguchi. He's an Italian-Japanese immigrant, and he is one of my favorite sculptors. There's a Noguchi Museum in Queens, New York. It also has an accompanying Zen garden. It's one of the calmest places in New York that you will find. Again, he's also interested in animals and nature. This one's called the Tiger's Mouth. And he loves taking different rocks, so different marbles, granites, sandstones, and creating different shapes that are kind of working within that structure. His pieces are beautiful. And he's very interested in the idea of play, and how when we are young, we are told to embrace play, and how when we get older, we kind of lose that, and thinking about what gets lost when our life is given order, it's given structure, and things like that. Another piece inspired by nature and also a nursery rhyme. This one's called Humpty Dumpty. And I like imagining him as creating this piece that was once whole and then attaching them together and giving it a new sense of balance. So with this set of works, there's several other pieces that are like this, where they are flat planes of these rocks, and that they're all kind of like interlocking with one another to stand. And he talks about how he was given an assignment maybe once in the kindergarten, where they had to cut out shapes and make them stand by cutting slits into them, inserting one into the other. And they all had to be free form standing shapes. And these are some of his drawings that he creates when working on his sculptures. to me, they look like musical notes. I don't know if there are other like types of musical notation other than like the Western one that we know about, but this to me reads like music. Another thing about his idea with play. So Noguchi was here in the United States when the United States government interned several hundreds of Japanese American communities. And this was like one of his like formative experiences. He talks about how in that time, even though it was kind of a horrible period of American history, he also remembers playing a lot. He remembers being around other kids his age. And so he created several mock-ups of playgrounds that are meant to exist within the earth. So this is a mock-up of a playground, and a lot of the playgrounds we think of, they are these like structures that we kind of just put on a piece of concrete or on a patch of grass, and that's it. And then they often break. These slides, these inclines, these seesaws and other things, they're all meant to be built within the earth. So imagine sliding down this formation that's been like sculpted out of this rock, or playing on these also slides and inclines and resting within them. None of these bigger playground projects, unfortunately, were realized. Several of them were like greenlit, and then cities, they understand how much it's going to cost to actually build these things, and then they say no in the end. The next Japanese American artist I want to bring up is Ruth Asawa. So Ruth Asawa is creating these very natural forms out of wire mesh. And so she weaves these wires and creates an outer sculpture. And then these wires come back in around, and then they provide structure for the inside. And she's thinking about plants and the way plants have structure within themselves and can withstand the elements, withstand rain and wind. And these are all like really perfectly, beautifully balanced woven metal pieces that also hang, and they're just really beautiful to look at. Some of these other ones, she's like turning them inside and out and playing with this form. And I was able to find an old video of her working, and I've actually never seen her working, so I'm gonna play this for you. Let me know if you can hear it. If you can't hear it, just speak up, and then I'll figure out what to do.
Black Mountain really influenced my whole approach. When Albers gave a class, say in paper, you weren't talking about going from paper, which is not very important, and going to, next you go into glass, and then next you go to wood, and then finally you graduate to plastics, because that's sort of the modern material. But we always went from paper to paper to paper to paper. To make paper do what it hasn't done yet. So you're only talking about paper. And then when you're through with the lesson, then you fold it and you put it back in your drawer. It's paper again. What he was talking about was abstracting from the material, rather than being concerned with your own design ideas and forcing something into it. What you do is you become background, just like a parent allows the child to express himself, and the parent becomes sort of supportive. What Albers did graphically, Bucky did by trial and error, just by putting marbles and pieces of paper together. And then he proceeded to unload in his tiny little aluminum trailer. All these things kept bouncing out. And then his idea to the college when he said, well, I'm the most successful failure. What I feel close to him about is that he gathered all of this information out of his own experience. For me, Bucky talks about basic principles, the use of the material to create a shape that can only be done by that material. That combination is what I'm interested in. The thing that really impressed me most about both Bucky and Albers is that they made a lifetime commitment. They weren't interested in ideas that were solved. They were only interested in ideas that didn't have a shape yet. I always begin from the inside, working inside, and then working on the surfaces inside, and then comes out here. And then when this comes to a certain point, then I begin to work inside, and then go on up. So that the interesting thing about this is that this is the outside surface in here, and then it becomes the inside surface of the next form. And then some of the examples that you could see would be this one here, where the center one is in here, and then it comes out and surfaces, and then goes in again and comes out again and comes around, so that this is a continuous surface. The things that interest me are the proportions that I see. When I'm working on a thing, then I am conscious of this kind of shape out here, and that shape by itself is not very interesting, but when I put one next to it, then I look at this shape that is out here.
All right. So that's an excerpt of Ruth Asawa's Of Forms and Growth. One thing about that video is that I hate the music. And that's just something that the producer feels they need to add to exoticize this person, make it known that this person is not white. And there's another interesting story related to that with her writing, or people writing about her work. And I feel like I've talked with several of you about how sometimes it's hard to like put to words the meaning behind your works. And then often like writers and critics, like that's their job, is to like assign meaning to what you're doing. But there's an interview where she talks about how there was like some writer that described her work as like coming out of her experiences in these Japanese internment camps, and how these wires are related to the fencing and like the cages that were being used then. And then when coming to this interview, they ask her like, is that true? And she's like, no, like, where did you get that from? She learned this technique of like wiring just like on a trip to Mexico. And so sometimes people are gonna assign things to your work that you have no intention of being there. And that's an importance of writing and being able to claim that for yourself. So this next artist I want to bring up is a comics artist and illustrator named David Mazzucchelli. His graphic novel is called Asterios Polyp, and it is a masterclass in color, form, and line. And it involves around this man. His name is Asterios Polyp. He's a professor of architecture at some prestigious school in upstate New York. And then his partner, Hana. Hana is a former student, I believe, or is aware of this person through school. And then they become romantically involved. And you'll see that Asterios throughout the comic, he is in blue, and his lines are all these clean vectors that you could imagine being drawn in Illustrator. And Hana is drawn with these like really textured contour cross-hatched lines. And it's this idea of the form and order and modernism kind of coming to grips with the natural order of things and the free flowing in Hana. And so they have this relationship. It, spoiler, doesn't necessarily end well. And so when they come together, you see their lines cross, and then the colors begin to change into purple. And then when they're in arguments and when they're like there's a big discrepancy between each other, they start to separate, and Hana's pink lines become their own, and Asterios's vectors separate. And just an idea of like Asterios as a person, like this is his apartment in New York City, very modern, all these clean lines, right angles, very, very formed shapes. And over the course of time, throughout the relationship, things like this happen, you know? And yeah, that's life. Asterios eventually like travels around the country. He kind of like creates a new identity for himself. And the illustrator Mazzucchelli also has a way of thinking about different people and the way they set up their rooms, the way they pay attention to the architecture of their space. And so there's this woman, this like new agey woman who's into astrology and talks about this room that she's created, and it's just based on intuition. And here Asterios is kind of like flipping out because it's like totally against all of the rules and structures that he as a modern architect believes should be abided by. And then we've got some other illustrations within the comic book that have no real order with perspective, but kind of show like this turmoil that's happening between them and their relationship. All right, this next artist I'm gonna bring up, he was active, I believe, in the 1940s, and his name is Archibald Motley Jr. Yeah, 1948, all right. So he came about during the Jazz Age, and a lot of his works depict African-American life, specifically nightlife, and around celebration, music, and being outside or being in the club. And here we have one of his pieces. This is a street in Chicago that is experiencing this new influx of African-American immigrants from the South. And he's depicting this. He's depicting this clash of two worlds that are coming about in this time. So in the 40s, there was this great Southern migration of Blacks from the South to work in urban cities like Chicago and New York and Baltimore in the North. And here he is kind of depicting that and what the street life looks like. Again, we have another piece, and you'll notice that he's using this very harmful trope, these like minstrel figures in some of his paintings. And they're always being cast as like this entertainer. And so he's making some commentary also about like the roles that African Americans are put in when they're placed in these new cities, and are some are being placed in the roles in labor, and others are being cast as entertainers, and some of the harm that goes about with seeing these Black people as someone that's there to provide entertainment. Here, though, we don't see any of that in this figure. So again, here we're in this like this public festival, and you have this caricature of a Black entertainer that's like kind of in the center, and some people are kind of looking at him like, what is this? Like, who is this for? But here we have this club scene. This is an African-American nightclub here that we're looking at. And we don't see that caricature. We don't see that trope anywhere here. Everyone is just themselves, and we have all these different skin tones as well. One of the harms of some of these earlier tropes is that Black people are being cast in this just like one color, and it's just like this neutral black. But here we have this nightclub scene of people of all different skin tones and variations, but they're all enjoying each other and are themselves in the space. And I love the different poses that we have of the people in this scene. We have people mimicking each other. We have people in sync with one another. And possibly my favorite part of this painting is this man right here in this corner. And he's like kind of beckoning people to join him in this negative space. And so most of this painting is active, but this is the part that my eye is drawn to. And my head kind of like fills in the space of someone coming here and joining him in dance. A contemporary artist that is very influenced by Archibald Motley is Nina Chanel Abney, who works out of New York and Jersey City. And she's got this piece that's dealing with this idea of the census, which is coming up, y'all, which you shall all fill out. And let's hear some of her thoughts here.
I probably would call my work colorfully seductive, maybe deceptively simple investigations of contemporary cultural issues. When I usually do more site-specific installation, I try to take a look at some of the news headlines or just general issues that area might be grappling with and how they relate to more broad issues, like world issues. For this piece in particular, I came across a few articles and it inspired me to investigate some of the subtleties of systemic racism and cultural racism. I was very excited about creating a piece that might really encourage some kind of dialogue for people who are just in the lobby. They can start to engage as soon as they walk in the door. I would have the viewer, when thinking about the checkerboard, maybe think about a grid or a race or a game or a racial binary. And with the figures in relation to the numbers, maybe look into disproportions, how people are counted, look at the census. When I'm creating the imagery, I usually take figures, I'll purposely make them anonymous or ambiguous, and also create symbols and iconography that can take on multiple meanings so the viewer can easily contextualize the work with themselves. When I'm trying to create work that will elicit some kind of response, I would say I will feel uneasy sometimes, but usually that tells me I'm going in the right direction. My thing is start the conversation. Most of the things are evident and the issues that I want everyone to kind of start to talk about, but it's really about the individual and how they connect to it. So as long as they are thinking about it for themselves, I'm happy.
So again, that's Nina Chanel Abney, relating to Motley's idea of this binary of black and white and people fitting in between that and trying to embrace this complexity of race and culture. That video is like one of her tamer pieces. We've got some of these other large scale works that she's working with. And you didn't get to see it in that video, but her primary medium is actually the aerosol spray can. So all these shapes, they're very geometric and clean, and you imagine like, oh, she must be such a measured painter, but she's actually taping these pieces, these shapes out of the way, and then spraying them to get this even coat across them. And most of her subjects center around police brutality, relations with the police, and I think it says a lot that she's choosing to paint these things with the, with the medium of graffiti in this like very like structured, rigid kind of way. So her works are just like a amazing collage of lines, of numbers, of text. And then also we get to see some of the marks that she's making, letting you know that, yes, this is spray painted. Okay. And now this last artist that I'm sharing is Norman McLaren. So we started off today with Mort Garson creating audio for the natural. And here we have Norman McLaren taking visuals for the sound and also having a wild time with it. I'm gonna play this. This is called The Fantasy in Colors. It's long, but I think it's delightful. So yeah, let's watch. All right. So that's A Fantasy in Colors. And Norman McLaren, he's a Canadian animator. And one thing that you should know is these animations are done directly onto the film. So all of these frames that we see are hand drawn on top of physical frames. And when you put them back in the reel to play the video once more, all those drawings and paintings that he's doing on top of the frames show up like this. And if that wasn't enough, he is also one of the pioneers in what's called visual sound. And so he also has a series of animations. Okay, I'm gonna do my best to describe this, but older frame reels, film reels, they would have information on the reel about the sound of it. And if you were to draw certain shapes or what's it called, mark up the frame reel, like the audio would get tarnished. And if you can imagine like a CD, or if any of your parents have like vinyl record players at home, once there's a scratch, you know that there's like, it like kind of bugs up and then it isn't playing the sound that it's supposed to. He was able to take that, so this like bug where when, you know, your CD, in this case, your film is, you know, messed with, and then the new sound appears, he was able to actually control the sound that appears by placing different shapes and colors on the reel. And so I'm gonna play this next video. This is called Synchrony. And the important thing to note is that all of these drawings that you see are actually the sound that the film is playing. I'm not gonna play all of it, but I'm just gonna go through here so you can kind of see it. So all these different bars and the length of it and the weight of it are changing the pitch and the tone of the note and the length of and duration of the note as well. And I don't know how, but he was able to figure out this like rule, this code that film uses to play audio, and was able to use it for his liking. So he's got a lot of stuff similar to this, all primarily working with the idea of what does sound look like. And so I'm gonna stop sharing. That's rhythm and balance. Before I give you all your prompt, I wanna just talk about like what struck a nerve with you. What were you all interested in with that set of artists today? Nothing? Was it a drag? Was it just a bore of an hour? If you don't remember their name, just tell me like what it looked like. Like I'm not quizzing you like to remember the names, but you know, something.
I liked the the woman who did like she was doing a lot of like faces and people with just like simple shapes. I really loved that. That's like I kind of can see like my style in that, and I think that's like it's really cool that she's just like layering tons of things and all these different shapes that are simple.
Yeah, she's the coolest. That's Nina Chanel Abney. Anyone
I
else?
really liked the one, like the modals, the forms, like the really simple ones.
The hanging
What was
ones?
that?
The
Yeah, but the one that I liked the best, it was like a stone carving, like in the ground. It looked
oh,
like a
the
face.
playground?
Yeah, I don't know. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, that's Noguchi's Playground series. Yeah. It's a shame that none of them ever got built. Yeah. Anything else?
I liked the like why can I not think of the word? The graphic novel that used like color and style to represent the characters. I thought that was really cool.
It's so good. I have a copy, so if you ever want to borrow it, let me know. And another, I didn't also mention, but also the typography. Like, so the lettering in it changes depending on who is speaking, and so each character has their own like font that he's created. So you should definitely look at that. That's a that'd be a great resource. What did y'all think about Norman McLaren? Did that make sense to you? Like what I was trying to like communicate his process is like? It's okay if it doesn't, because I don't get it. Like I don't know how he does that.
I thought it was really cool and sort of similar to the graphic novel, how like an image can be associated with something more than an image, like a character, or in this case, a sound. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of crazy how it's like two of your senses working at the same time together, but in like a natural way. So you're not like making the decision of what the like two senses are doing together. It's like one thing that hits two different senses.
Yeah, totally.
It was kind of strange actually watching it. I felt like I was watching like one of those videos that like supposed to like hypnotize you or like make you like, or have you seen those things where it's like look into this for 5 seconds and then look at your room and it's like stuff all over the walls with colors and stuff? That's what I felt like I was watching. It was kind of strange.
Yeah, I totally feel that. Anything else, folks? I'm just gonna go back and see if there's anything else I wanted to. Kai, James is really into Norman McLaren. So if that was something you're interested in, he will talk your ear off about him. I had a very tame New Year's Eve with James where we were just watching stuff like that. And then it was like 12:30 and we're like, oh, Happy New Year. All right, so your prompt, which I'm sure you're all anxious to hear about. Let's get to it. Your prompt, think of a rule you have always been told to follow. Break it. Tuesday, September 8th. That's the prompt. This can be a rule you've been told to follow in life. This can be an artistic or visual rule that, I don't know, someone has passed on to you. It's open-ended. It's up to your interpretation. Yeah. Any questions about this one? I think this should be fun. Yeah, we've been an illustrator. We've been following so many grid lines. Let's break out of it. Okay, speaking of break, it's 50. I'll see you at 10.